members?
Well, I'm not a committee member, but I agree with that. So I feel like that's what we should be aiming toward, and that's what we are. And I think I didn't mean to inject more confusion. I was hoping to just say we are preparing those pieces with updates if they're needed, without updates if they're not needed, but they'll still be there, and then we can look at the thing as a whole. So I think we all agree.
I would just add, Shoshana, I agree too, and I think as you get some grounding in this role, Bob used to be able to tell us over time things that were just dead issues, and we would kind of weed out the stuff that wasn't going anywhere to highlight them. But I think for now we should stick with where we've been. I would hope that as you develop relationships with people in the legislature, you'll be able to help focus the report on the things that are really doable.
New recommendations. I've gotten the agenda, Assemblywoman Pollin's bills, but it's really all of a piece with the recommendations from Reinvent Albany on disclosure. And I think we decided that we want to move forward and see these. Does anyone want to jettison any of the Assemblywoman's proposals or Reinvent Albany's right now, or do you want to see it written up? Committee?
So hi everyone. It's Vilda. So when we say, I guess, because it's my first one, is it that we would add them, the Assemblywoman's proposal, we would add them in the report as received, but not necessarily supporting or not supporting, or do we always say specifically what position the committee is taking as to something that's come before us that relates to one of the three statutes under the purview of the committee?
We usually take a position, but we don't have to. We could just note it if we wanted to, right? Do you others, Bill, do you feel the same way?
I don't think there's any point in noting something if we're not in favor of it. But we don't necessarily have to agree with the exact language. Not that I disagree with anything there. The Reinvent Albany stuff, maybe not so much. I think I agree with Dave that some of them aren't really something that we should support. But I haven't really, had time to decide which ones exactly. I don't think it would hurt to list them in the draft report, and as we're reading through it, we can take our positions in and bring them up at the next meeting.
There are two other issues that were raised, and again, let's see. One was annual financial disclosure forms by local elected officials. I've forgotten who made this recommendation, but that seems to be something we should consider. And actually, there are three things. I'll just list them because they're not necessarily on the agenda. The disclosure of annual financial disclosure forms by local elected officials. Modification to education law, and the recommendation was that evaluations of the data used to evaluate teachers or educational staff, I guess, be disclosed. And the third was COVID disclosure, which has been criticized that the underlying data has not been made available. So we can discuss those in seriatim. I just wanted to get them all out on the table. The first was the annual financial disclosure forms. I've forgotten whose recommendation that was. It might have been Reinvent Albany's. I'm not sure.
I think it was Paul Wolf. That was just.
Well, why don't we can let Paul address that. Dave, do you have a thought?
No, I do, but I'd be happy to hear from Paul first.
Paul, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
You want to speak to this issue?
Sure. So right now, the law that's in effect is a general municipal law, requires government officials, we're talking specifically elected officials in municipalities with a population of 50,000 or more must file an annual disclosure form. The state legislature, under a different law, state elected officials file a disclosure form as well. The interesting thing is the disclosure forms for every state elected official are posted online on the JCOPE website. So anyone can go and look at their senator, assembly members, the governor's financial disclosure form. The same is not true for local government officials. There's no mandate that their reports have to be posted online. If you want it, you can file a FOIL request, which I've done on several occasions, and as we all know, that's a long process and takes months, and sometimes there's denials and redactions. And so what we support is that, and I believe legislator Paulin is going to be introducing a bill on this as well, just mandating that any disclosure forms, we're talking just, again, elected officials, be posted on their government website so the public can see.
Committee
So
discussion?
into a category of proactive disclosure then, right, Paul?
Yes.
Committee discussion, or do you want to wait to see it written up? Bill, Joel?
I think it's definitely worth including, but I would like to see what the write-up's going to be ultimately. As long as it's limited to elected officials, and then rank and file state employees like me don't really, need to have their financial disclosure statement put out there online every day for no reason.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'd like to see it written up too, just to understand the nuances or why, you know what I mean. I like words now.
Paul, if you've got any of this written up, you might send it to Shoshana and Kristen so that they've got a place to start for the existing law. And you may have already done this. I got a stack of materials here, but if you could do that, that would be great. Then the education law, I can't recall who raised this. Was this another one from you, Paul?
No, this was actually something that a constituent correspondent with the committee had raised.
Yes.
And we did discuss it a little bit in substance at the last meeting, and then I followed it up with a recommendation to the members. I don't know, Franklin, you may not have received it. It was later on the day of the same meeting. And it basically, what it did was it basically described that I think that the correspondent may have been confused a little bit about what laws would apply, because there was a suggestion that something was absolutely not going to be provided when it could. So I'm happy to be wrong, but I would refer people to that discussion that I sent in writing as sort of how I would write it up, which is sort of a non-support.
I did read it, and my question, I guess, is there a recommendation for a change in law, and is there a recommendation for legislation that we might like to make? Because basically, school teachers are the only employees whose evaluations and the underlying data is not disclosed, according to that inquiry. And I don't know how I feel about that, but I thought it was worth discussing whether there's a proposal there or whether it's something we don't care about. Not don't care about, but don't want to address.
I guess I think that maybe I was not clear in my write-up, but I think that these are actually covered. It's a codification, really, of 87.2G. just specifically called out in the education law where other categories of records are subject to 87.2G. So too are these. They're just identified as, the fact that their opinions is just called out in the law.
Yeah, I thought Shoshana's analysis was right on point, and we don't really need to get involved with this.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
I
I
also,
didn't mean to suggest that I thought our analysis was wrong under current law. My question was, are we interested in getting into recommending a legislative change here? And I don't have an opinion on it. I'm just raising.
I don't think anything's necessary because the way the law is, as she says, the outcome would be exactly what the person's looking for, I think.
Okay.
I agree with that. After reading Shoshana's write-up, I thought this was an issue we really shouldn't wade into. That I don't disagree with where the law has things.
Okay, last item is COVID data. And there have been some write-ups on this, and this issue is extending to today. I mean, there are complaints even in this morning's emails that I received that the city and state were not disclosing underlying health data to let the press and others understand what's going on. And I don't know that we have a proposal, and I don't know how we fix it, but it is sort of open government in some senses at its worst. That this is important life-changing data that's simply not being disclosed, or that's being disclosed piecemeal. Thoughts?
One question I would have, Franklin, is whether we know if anyone submitted a FOIL request for data that was declined.
Yeah.
Because that would raise questions to me. But otherwise, objecting to the way the governor's office was releasing things is really a question of proactive disclosure. So we might want to include something in our discussion of proactive disclosure of circumstances when it's very important for the public to have timely information. But I don't know that there's a specific legislative fix for health data. Again, unless someone is interpreting the law in a way that says even randomized data can't be released. I know in some states that was a problem, but I don't know if that's been a problem in New York. I don't know the answer.
Well, I agree with you that it has to be proactive, because by the time you filed a FOIL request, not a speedy process. Well, let's look into whether what's been written up on this, and consider whether we want to add a comment, whether there is existing legislation that's being ignored, or whether there should be a legislative proposal to address this. I mean, I'm sensitive to the fact that it's health data, but it's not actually personal health data. It's aggregate numbers without identities attached.
This is Joel. I wanted to ask real quick. I've been checking that COVID dashboard and the DOH website quite regularly since March. I know that does have a lot of data. I'm just wondering what data points we're talking about, because I can't think of any, and I don't know if maybe it's me. I don't know. Just curious as to what sort of data that aggregated and anonymized data that we think that we're missing, because I think that's something that maybe we, if there's a data point that we look at that fits that criteria of aggregated and anonymized, then maybe that's something that we could just we can just make a request or something. I don't know. Just thinking.
Well, the issue that was pending today was the distribution of COVID hotspots in Brooklyn, where I live. And there was some obfuscation about exactly what was happening where. And there were definitely complaints that the mayor / governor were not disclosing the raw data from which one might make assumptions, predictions, complaints. Back early on, what was a little aggravating to me in March and April was that and I was addicted to the governor's excellent reports every day, but he picked and chose whether he disclosed hospitalizations, ICU rates, and we knew at the time that ICU was very related to impending death, more so, thankfully, than it is now. And those numbers were just not findable. Or if they were, I wasn't able to find them, and other groups were complaining that they couldn't find them. So the raw data was not being shared, and maybe it's over and done with, but it was, it seemed to me that it was being withheld for political reasons. And that's
sorry, not to overstep my boundaries here, but someone who's on the forefront of delivering the information every day and managing over the control rooms regionally around the state. All of our local elected officials, everybody around the state was able to access the metrics dashboard. I think it was like the third week of March we started looking at that thing, and I will say there were no shortage of dashboards, so perhaps that may have I don't know, confused folks of what numbers and where to look at times, but I can assure you that all of those numbers that you just said were not up there were accurately reported, and it's by the county Department of Health that is then reported back every single day. So this really is, a layered process, and I cannot, emphasize the amount of transparency that this administration has prioritized throughout.
I should have sent my assemblywoman to you because she couldn't find it.
I'm happy to take the assemblywoman's call. I am very familiar.
Well, that's good news. It was not, that was not obvious what the link was to the general public. Let's just say it was not obvious to everyone. Okay, well, I just thought we should have it on there. Can you send me the link? Is that Jeff Lewis that was speaking?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you send us the link to that dashboard, because I think it's the dashboard we were looking at in April and couldn't tease out that data. But I'd be happy to be wrong.
I had a question. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, hi, this is Maria.
Mary Shia?
Maria. That's
Maria,
my
sorry. It comes across as Mary.
from Buffalo, New York. I have a question about the COVID. We all seem to agree that getting FOIL information, getting information is a daunting task. And the state gets the information, they filter it down to the county, which in my case is Erie County. But we have 3 cities and 25 town governments that I'm aware of. And I'm just thinking, if you're going to get the COVID information from the state, shouldn't there be a mechanism where the municipality that I live in, the neighboring one, I should be able to access that information to see the rise and fall or incidence of the COVID with, without identifying names and, not violating HIPAA laws. But in other words, if Erie County has increased, say, 2%, and the municipality I live in or the next one is down to 0.5, shouldn't that information be someplace in a timely manner without having to do a FOIL to the state, a FOIL to the county, and then going to your township, which will say, I anticipate will say, we don't have that information from the state or the county, you're going to have to call those guys. And so the long and short of all that is you wouldn't have the information that you should as a consumer just know whether it's high or low in your area. So I don't know how that would be.
Jeff, can you address that? I see that you.
I just sent around the regional dashboard for everybody to take a look at. It also includes the hospitalization rate that you were including with a county breakdown. That is in the additional links that you can find below that particular percentage positive regional breakdown.
Okay,
That
so
is
you,
the epicenter right there, and from that you can access everything else.
Boy,
so
I
you'd be
swear
able
I
to
think
look at,
this is where I was looking.
I don't have that. Maybe I just don't have it on my. So in other words, you'd be able to look and see where Amherst, Tonawanda, Hamburg, their incidents as of the last couple of days.
I'm so sorry. Can I interrupt? This is Vilda Mayuga. I'm just trying to, Maria, I if you could just take this offline and reach out to the appropriate, office. You can reach out to the governor's office, I guess, to get this information. I know you might not be seeing it on the chat. I just want to make sure that we stay on top of it and an agenda for the committee. It is already 11:13, and I do have a question about an opinion that's articulated, because I do think that is committee business that should be discussed, and I guess.
Okay, great. Is there an email? Is there an email that I could send with to reach out for that information?
I would just go to governor's west of the DOH, but Jeff, if you know it off the top of your head, I just don't think that this is the forum for this type of question that you ask.
Yeah, I just circulated the link around, so if Candace and or somebody else from the committee could circulate that or email it to the wider group, that'd be appreciated.
Terrific.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. New business or other business, Vilda? You obviously have something. We're just about at the end.
Great, thank you. So there was, just wanted to circle back and close the loop on the decision that, Shoshana, you had circulated, and of course now I'm looking for it, that Bill then responded, and you also responded to that on the relationship within the general construction law about quorum and the open meetings law.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I guess I don't think we closed the loop on it. So I wanted to see if we were voting on it? Are we discussing it?
No, we issued the opinion. We issued the opinion. Nobody objected. There was just one question about it. I responded. So the opinion's been issued.
Okay. Okay. Well.
Really?
I didn't agree with I guess once Bill raised an objection basically with it, I thought that was then going to be open for discussion. So I guess moving forward, if we could just agree to the process that once somebody raises a question, the final decision is not made until we either meet or we have in writing, if we need to do it by email, I guess. Agree that that's the route, because I just simply, put it on hold until this meeting to then discuss it, since it's just easier to have a conversation about issues rather than going back and forth on emails. Because I initially understood, I understood the way you wrote the decision, but then when I read Bill's message, it got me, I went back to it and I was like, oh, actually, I can see Bill's point, and I was more inclined to agree with Bill, and was hoping that we could have discussed this during today's meeting. But I don't know if there's a way.
Can you circulate the final opinion, Shoshana?
Certainly, it doesn't differ in any respect from the draft that was circulated, but also.
Okay.
And I guess on that note, I'll wait, but that I really wanted to talk about that, and if there's nothing, maybe we can.
Well, we'll have to clarify, certainly, Vilda, we can discuss, but I wanted to just point out that in the past, before I came here, there would be no communications between the staff and the committee members when opinions were issued. It was the legal opinion of the staff. The opinion would be issued without communication. So the first agenda item at the first meeting, or maybe it wasn't the first agenda item, but one of the early agenda items was the kind of coordination that I was going to try to introduce between the committee staff and the committee members to try to ensure that that opinions taken on novel issues of law that had not yet been determined by either the committee or by a judge would be those of the committee as a whole. So what I then did was, for one or two opinions so far, maybe three, shared a summary of an opinion or the actual draft opinion where it was a novel issue that had never yet been identified and addressed with the committee members, and said, if you have an objection to this, please let me know, and we'll hold on the issuance if if a majority of members object, where we then can discuss it and vote. But if a majority didn't object, then we were going to issue the opinion, feeling that might reflect any vote that might have to be taken. No vote is required on the opinions issued by the committee, and of course that was an item that was in a bylaw, but we've tabled that discussion or postponed that discussion for a bit.
Okay. I guess I don't have the benefit of whatever was being done before, not having really experienced it. And I know that there was, an attempt to perhaps reduce to writing some processes. And perhaps we can do a little bit. I'm not married to any particular format of where we kind of, lay down what the process should be, but I guess I would like to, if there's a written document that I can refer to, as I get ready for meetings. I want to make sure that I'm giving, obviously, this community the attention that I think I give to the rest of my job, my work, especially since I'm a designee, and I'm not here to express my opinion, but obviously representing the Secretary of State. So I guess I want to understand, so that if I need to speak up within a particular time frame, I don't want to miss that vote to raise an issue that then we're going to be married to, I guess, for lack of a better term in my mind right now, in terms of tying the committee to any particular opinion that's issued. And I guess the other issue is I really enjoy listening to all the opinions, but I also, it really throws me off to hear non-committee members during these meetings, and I want to understand what is the process and how we are managing that. Because, it was hopeful to know that Assemblymember Pauling was going to speak, so I was a kid, and I know you see some of the bills and all of that. But I do, I really appreciate being organized and following a certain format, obviously with whatever flexibilities we feel like we need to keep in mind to allow for what we stand for, right? An open government. But I said it last meeting that I do think when we were talking about the letter that we all agreed was well drafted and that you would use for any members who may have been missing meetings, and we want to make sure that they are aware of our expectation of an active participation, that we should make decisions based on, how a committee, our committee should work, and not about, not based on something that's happening at the moment, or who is in the committee, or who has spoken at whatever meeting or anything like that. I really think it's helpful, especially also if others who are not committee members want to speak. I think it will be helpful for them to understand how do they do that, as opposed to just joining a meeting and talking. It's just helpful. It's organized, and it allows for, I think, the proper discussion and listening to whatever substance that individual may bring. So those are the two things that I would love to maybe, either talk about, or if there's like a written proposal. It doesn't have to be, for me, it doesn't have to be bylaws. I mean, I don't know how other committees or organizations of, similar nature as ours in government, local or state government operate, and perhaps it's a good exercise to see if there's other, organizations, other groups, other committees like ours, that we can maybe look and see if whatever they're doing works for us in terms of guiding our process.
I'd like to speak to both of your issues. One is, as I agreed, I thought Bill's comment on the quorum point was very well taken, and I was a little surprised to know that the opinion had gone out so quickly. So maybe what we need is a little bit, we committee members need to be clearer when we want to have additional discussion, and the staff can be a little clearer on when they receive an objection, how quickly they're going to move on it. So I think there's definitely room for improvement there. With the speaking from members of the public, we've always had members of the public appear at our meetings, not at every meeting, but at lots of meetings, and we generally give them an opportunity to say their piece. I had sort of intended to call for public comment at the end of our discussion, but it seemed like taking the flexibility to have Paul Wolf of Reinvent Albany speak to his issues was going to inform our discussion. So that's why I varied with that. I like, if you can tell, I like to follow an agenda. I like to be efficient. And it seems to me that to the extent that we got off track on that this time, it was not for want of doing that. So I agree with both of your comments, Velda. Real quickly, what we have left is basically our timeline. When will we have a draft annual report, and when can we
Franklin, you can have a draft based on the conversation we've had today. We'll be able to provide a draft by the end of business Monday, and then we can meet at any time thereafter.
You're muted, Franklin.
I was going to say, we'll ask Candace to poll us all for maybe not next week, but the week after. I don't know I don't know what that gets into, but she will do her thing and poll us for available dates. Anything else?
Well, sorry, I wasn't satisfied with the answer to my points. I guess I understand the informal process we have right now, but if I could, I would, I don't know, obviously there's more of, the committee members, but could we please have staff look into what other similar bodies like ours follow and see if we can just have a better sense of process? It doesn't, I remember the bylaws discussion. It doesn't necessarily have to be bylaws. I get what you said, Franklin. I don't know. I can't. It's just too loose for me to just have open and this thing, because if more people want to come, I want to be also give whoever, if that's what we want to do, if allow people to speak, then fine, but it'll be nice to like an order and like a time limit that sure we can also be flexible with, depending on how many people are signed up and how long we've gone on the meeting and what's the time allocated. So I wanna keep all of that in mind. I don't want it to be like, oh, today you work, but then next time you wouldn't. I think if we have a little bit more set up model, that would be helpful. And then if we can also, so that's one. Can we please have staff look into process that maybe others have followed that we could consider? And then the other piece is, can we agree, Shoshana, that if there's an opinion that somebody does raise a comment, that you don't issue the opinion until, I guess if you're going to do that, maybe perhaps just be clear about it in your email so that we can be, quick to raise our hand if we want it a little time.
Sure, Vilda, I can do that. I want to point out again that the circumstances in which I would coordinate an opinion like that would be one, they're very limited, where it's a novel issue that's never been looked at before and there's no court guidance. So had been my agreement in the beginning, or my change to prior procedure that happened before I got here. I thought that the email that said, unless I hear a majority of you objecting by a date certain, I would issue the opinion, was clear, but I will try to make it clearer. And certainly, make it clear the opportunity for people to, I guess, raise their hand before I issue an opinion. Maybe I'll stretch that time out a little bit more.
Yeah, I would
Yeah, I
also
think
suggest.
it's
Normally,
the
people
fact
are
that
willing to give their opinions, you know, pretty quickly, and we've been very good in the past with respecting people's timelines to hear from us.
I think the fact that we started a bit of a dialogue made people think that it was going to continue and overrid the prior instruction of the time limit. So I certainly didn't think we were going to go ahead with the opinion. So
Shoshana, could I also?
I just didn't hear from anybody else after I sent my note.
I understand that, but
Except for one person who said they thought it was fine. So that's the only other thing.
See, I think Shoshana, maybe it's because we haven't had a good practice on this, but we had the same sort of confusion with the bylaws. People didn't report back, and you thought they were all fine. I think you need to understand, or we should have a process, I guess, that if someone has a serious objection, to just say, well, unless a majority of people vote against it, I'm going to do it, is difficult because I would want to hear the discussion. I'd want to know more about why someone's objecting to decide where I come out on an issue. So unless something is time sensitive, I would think that if you got a pushback from some people, the logical thing to do would be to say, well, let's take it up at a meeting and we'll hold on it. And if it's time sensitive, then maybe there should be a way to give people to say, look, there's an objection to this, but I need to get it out, so we either need to take a vote or something, rather than just have a kind of a negative presumption that it goes out unless you get a majority of people objecting.
I hear you.
I'd also, just to respond to Velda's, we do have Robert's Rules of Order, so there's some semblance of rules, but I agree with you. I like rules, so let's continue the discussion on that. The last item, which I didn't put on the agenda, but given everything we talked about, are there any members of the public that wish to make brief statements concerning matters relevant to this committee?
And I apologize, but I have another meeting I'm going to have to sneak off. It's 11:30, but thank you all. Thanks, Shoshana and Kristen. Look forward to the report.
And for members of the public, we will have another meeting, so you'll have another opportunity. No one? Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Somebody move to adjourn?
I'll move.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.